Greetings, programs, and welcome back to the Awesome Friday podcast. Returning to you after a 2-week hiatus due to Easter and other things, vacations mostly. My name is Matthew, and I am your host. And with me, as is standard operating procedure, is Simon. Say hello, Simon.
Hello, everyone. How lovely to have you back in our quiet little room again while we talk about two movies.
Indeed. And we actually have, according to our stats, we have at least a few new subscribers this week.
What?
And it's growing every week now, which is kind of wonderful to watch happening. So everyone who's listening, thank you so much. And reminder that, I don't want to necessarily start the show with an ad, but we do have a Patreon and you do get bonus content if you are a subscriber. So check out links in the show notes for Patreon, and that's all I'm going to say about that for right now. But yes, how was your Easter, Simon?
So Easter is a bit like Christmas for me in that I am a Catholic. That's true. So I do like to commemorate the time that we did really bad things to the leader of our faith. It's when I mean that, I mean food primarily, because I do like to eat. And Easter and Christmas, I'm like, the rest of the time I try to eat pretty well. We've got a pretty good diet. I don't binge. We have a good mix of this. Easter and Christmas, like, there's no point. I'm just going to be miserable if I don't eat chocolate, if I don't drink this wine, if I don't eat this food. So Easter was just a cornucopia of non-stop chocolate and food and wine and family time, and that's just the best time. My daughter and I went to we found a local Catholic church that's basically there were 6 non-Vietnamese people in that church, and we were 2 of them, and it was kind of awesome. And at one point we're like, did we come to the English service or the Vietnamese service? Have we chosen the right one? But it was lovely. The singing, I'd say this about the Vietnamese. Catholic churches have a bit of a reputation, completely deserved, for being quite dreary, and the singing's dour. My wife, who is very much not a Catholic, does not like going to Catholic church. She likes churches where people, I don't know, celebrate with happiness, and the Catholics are more like, no. This is not how we roll. Well,
yeah.
But
like that old Eddie Izzard sketch where he talks about how, like, Catholic singing is like, oh God, what is my head about?
Except which is accurate, except when you mix in the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese, like, you know what? We'll keep everything, but we're gonna just change all the music so it's actually fun, like nice. And it was a lot of the stuff that I knew, but it was all the music was completely new to me, and it was lovely. It was a live choir, there was a guitar and people singing, and everyone applauded at the end. And I do like we're in a Vietnamese neighborhood now, and they do seem to have it down when it comes to like being happy in public. And their food's also incredible, so that's nice. So I'm going to try and get into that community so I can get some Vietnamese grandma can make me home cooked Vietnamese food every week. So that's nice. But I had the best roast chicken I've ever had in my life. Kudos to my wife. I had lots of alcohol. We did egg hunt. It's just nice family time. It was good. But I was here. We had so many plans for Easter, and they all, like you, we had plans of much more complicated things, and I'm quite glad that in the end we were busy from morning to night for 3 days, but I'm glad we didn't go away. But you did go away. How did that go for you?
I did. I went away and I did very little for 4 days in a very idyllic place, and it was wonderful. I don't know how many people who are listening have been to Vancouver Island, but that is where my in-laws live. It is right next to where I grew up, and it's a wonderful place. So we just ate a lot of food and played a lot of cards, and that was basically the whole weekend. It was wonderful.
I really like that stretch from, you're in Nanaimo, right? And so
Well,
That's
Qualicum Beach, but yes.
Qualicum Beach. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I knew it wasn't. So Qualicum Beach, and then if you go north a little bit, you get to this tiny, tiny, tiny little town with a really good diner in it that I can't remember what it's called, but it's really close to the market with the goats on the roof. What's that market called?
Oh,
What's that?
Coombs. It's called Goats on the
The
Roof.
goats on the roof, the
Yeah,
bus that can slow down.
yeah.
Um,
It's
uh,
and it's
that's super cool.
at a place called Coombs.
Right, Coombs, right?
Yeah,
I love that area. I just felt really at home, and it's so beautiful.
yeah,
And it's just you got lots of water, and the food's really good, and everyone just kind of chilled, and yeah, I really like it there.
yeah. The island time is definitely a thing when you're talking about people being
So,
chill.
right.
Yeah. Yep,
That's
it's
it.
true. It's true. And if and as established in our bonus features this week, you haven't watched anything, so there's nothing to talk about
Already.
there. My physical media collection is off to a gangbusters start, which is kind of expensive, but
Yeah.
so far I'm very much enjoying having Blu-rays again, and especially UHD Blu-rays. Like I don't really appreciate how much better 4K looks coming off of a disc than off of
Mm,
a stream. It's kind
yeah,
of
it really
incredible.
does. Yeah, it really does. Have you actually watched anything that you're buying? Because my that's the worst thing I do is I buy stuff and then I never watch it or read it.
Yeah, I haven't been watching at the same rate I've been buying lately, but in the last week, I watched my shiny new Blu-ray of Pitch Black. I watched my
Damn
sorry
you.
in the last 2 weeks, I watched my shiny new Blu-ray Arrow Video Special Edition of Pitch Black. I watched my limited edition UHD of Dragon Slayer, which is a film I still honestly can't believe you've never seen.
I should get on that.
And then I also watched a movie that I very much like. It's probably one of my would be on my all time list if I were to ever compile that. Called I bought the Criterion Edition Blu-ray of The Last Emperor, which is just a gorgeous
Mm,
film to look at. Um, and it's progressive in a way that an 80s film centered on Asian people would be, I guess, the way to put it.
mm,
Won a ton of Academy Awards, but wasn't nominated for any acting awards, which I find a little weird. Um, it's always weird when a film is the best written and directed and picture of the year, but
mm,
somehow not the best acted. I find that a little weird.
mm. I haven't seen it in decades. I'd love to
Yeah.
rewatch that.
Yeah, it's if nothing else, it is like it won a bunch of technical awards, and it is it's a gorgeous movie.
Hmm.
It's just beautiful to look at. Could watch it with the sound off practically.
Who's the
Uh,
director of that? Is it someone I should know?
yes, it is.
Everyone to Google. Oh,
It
but
is
Bernardo
it's
Bertolucci.
yeah, Bertolucci. Yeah, I always want to say Milos Forman, but it's not. It's Bertolucci. I don't know why I want to say Milos Forman, but
No. What
probably
else is
because
what
another
else is he
film
doing?
that's in a similar sort of like gorgeous to look at, amazingly written and acted.
Um,
Another film I sort of in my head associated with is Amadeus, and that one is definitely Milos Forman.
oh, he did Last Tango in Paris. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So his filmography is not entirely unproblematic, but yes,
It's very, very subtle.
yeah, yeah.
Good.
So
Well, I see that we used to live within walking distance, where your ballooning Blu-ray collection and mine, in fact, would have been a really positive thing, as we can just walk like 2 minutes to each other's collection and just steal whatever we want. And I feel like you should move back close again so I can steal these beautiful Blu-rays you have and
I'll
not
tell you
have
what.
to.
One day I'll win the lottery, and when I do, I'll just buy us a duplex.
You'll
Yeah,
see my kids all the time. Then is that
and
is that? Oh, okay, good. Just
I said,
just
I said, I didn't
forewarned.
say, I said duplex. We can always lock our door. It's fine.
Yeah. Uh, oh,
Yeah.
by the way, you should know. I'm sorry, my kids do talk. My kids use you as a universal reference for how tall people are. Like you've become a unit of measurement. Like Clara, my daughter Clara is 9. She had a beautiful haircut yesterday, and her hairdresser was so tall, but she didn't express this as, oh, he was really tall. She said, he's even taller than Uncle Matt. And this has come up a number of times for whether someone is their comparative height to you. Like you've become this yardstick of when it changes from tall to really tall is like I would say the difference between me and you.
Right. There's taller and there's Matt. Gotcha.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Like how many mats to the moon? And they're like, well, probably about like 28 mats to the moon. There and back.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm pretty sure that your kids are not the only people who use that relative measure either, just for the record.
Just yeah,
Yeah,
but with all right to do it as well because you are a tall person.
that's true. And that seems like as good of a segue as any to a film, a wonderful film
Which one?
about a Canadian person. I guess I don't know. It's not really actually a good segue. It's just time to segue. So we, as per usual, are going to talk about two films this week. One Canadian film that was nominated for. We're going to start with the Canadian film that at this year's CSA's Canadian Screen Awards was nominated for a number of awards, which, as of this recording, you can find out the winners, but the actual ceremony, like the ceremonies have happened, but they're being streamed on Gem tonight, Sunday. But Falcon Lake, which was nominated for Best Motion Picture, Best Director, Best Lead Performance, Best Supporting Performance, Best Adapted Screenplay, and won the John Dunning Award for Best First Feature. And Simon, why don't you take us through this magical summer odyssey that is Falcon Lake?
So a family goes to stay with another family for some time, and the other family lives near the lake, Falcon Lake. And family A has a young son called Bastian, who's almost 14. He's 13, going on 14. And family B has a very typical 16-year-old teen girl who's a bit closed off, always on her phone, doesn't have a great relationship with her mum, and is kind of doesn't really want these people in her space. And basically, the story is almost entirely of how Chloe, and Bastian develop a friendship. And through this friendship, we learn more about Chloe's life and how sexualized she is from everyone around her, and it's she opens up about how difficult that is for her as well. And Bastian is going through a point in his life where he is discovering his own reactions to the things he's attracted to around him, specifically Chloe. And it's a love story. Also a friendship story. They're kind of separate as well, which I really appreciate. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a very delicate character study of a 14-year-old falling in love with a 16-year-old, and the 16-year-old may be falling in love back. And it's set in this very rural area around the lake, and basically the drama of which I completely empathize, because I certainly felt very similar to Bassi when I was 14, hanging around 16, 17-year-olds, because Chloe's friends who she hangs out with are a little bit older as well. So there's a disconnect. Just those couple of years is really difficult for him to kind of integrate with that friend group, and also watch how the boys around her are really kind of sexualize her and objectify her, um and what he can do about that. And that's it really. I don't There's not much more to say, in that it is a character study, and it's just beautifully shot. It looks gorgeous. I don't know about you. I grew up in a rural area. I know you did too. Would it make sense to you if I said I could smell this film?
I mean, yeah. Anyone
You know
who's
what I mean? Right.
so this film comes on the tail end of not the tail end, but there's been a real wave of Canadian film in the last couple of years, especially that are coming of age stories set in isolated rural areas, often around a body of water.
Mm.
And this one, you know, if you want to watch a coming of age story set in rural Canada around a body of water, then this is probably one of the better examples of that.
Hmm.
in the last several years. You're right. It's beautifully shot. It's shot to the point where like I haven't been to Falcon Lake, but like I've been to lakes exactly
Yeah.
like Falcon
Oh
Lake,
yeah,
and
for
I can,
sure.
you can smell the evening dew and
Hmm.
the the latent scent of bonfire and sunscreen and all of that stuff, and yeah, like wet clothes drying on clotheslines, and food left out, and all of that stuff. Um, it's very true to the sort of way it is in cottage country, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, and you're right too. It's very, not only is it beautifully shot, it's beautifully acted, especially I would say by Joseph Engel and Sarah Monpetit, who are the leads, Bastian and Chloe in particular. I mean, it's hard not to be. They're basically the entire movie.
Hmm.
But given that, I think um, I don't actually know how old Joseph Engel is, but they're both clearly teenagers.
Yeah.
Um, and it's I think it's wonderful that they were both nominated for their performances at the CSAs. I think
Yeah.
having watched it, they're both very deserving. Um, and just the way that Bastion's character arc from like, because you're right, he's definitely at that age. He's going through that period of time that every young person goes through, where you finally start going like, oh, people I'm attracted to.
Yeah.
I have reproductive organs on my body. Like it's it's and that the telling of that time of sort of self discovery through another person who takes an interest, I think we probably all have some kind of story like that,
Yeah,
and
for
so
sure.
it feels very true.
Hmm.
Um, and also you're right, the way that Bastion behaves when he's around all of the other kids who are all like, she's 2 years older than him and they're all 1 to 3 years older than
Hmm.
her, and that disconnect is, I think, wonderfully portrayed as well. The way he reacts, he at one point he goes to a party and there's an for a moment he's the center of attention, and then when he's not, he's really not, and that the way that all plays out, I think, is very very truthful. Um, I also really like that there's this weird undercurrent, not weird, but there's this sort of dark undercurrent where we don't like, it's kind of tense for a lot of the time, and
Hmm.
it has this um I was going to say it feels almost like a horror film, but it's
Hmm.
not really that intense. Hi, buddy. That's my cat saying hi.
Yeah, your cat agrees. It does feel like a horror film for sure.
Yeah, and that, I mean, honestly though, the going through that sort of sexual awakening is kind of horrifying. So maybe it makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah, no, yeah, mine certainly was a horror film.
yeah. So I don't know. I know you had
So
some extra thoughts. I know
yeah,
there's a danger with a film like this of when you're trying to show a young woman being sexualized that you end up sexualizing them, and I feel like you had thoughts about that.
so I don't have a solution to this. I texted this like I don't. This is a film about an over sexualized 16-year-old girl,
Yeah.
and the way she is viewed by the younger and older men around her, and the film does not put away from showing us not only how she is sexualized, but how she uses her own sexuality. Really, as she becomes more connected with Bastion, she becomes more open to using her own physicality to kind of bond with him. And it sounds weird, but it works in the film.
Hmm.
I don't know how it would be possible to make a film with those themes without the camera over sexualizing the 16-year-old. And there are there are some very intimate moments in this film. When I say this film is exceptionally acted, like, and I don't mean on a showy level, I mean from a commitment level. The two leads are amazing in how uh, they carry out some scenes in this film that must have taken just the most. preparation and bond between these two, and the
Hmm.
trust between these two, and I think that says so much about the director as well. Not just that it is beautifully shot, but the trust the two actors have with each other to do the things that they do in this film on screen is is mind blowing. But you do, as a watcher, we are actively over sexualizing this 16-year-old. We are the people. We are part of the problem because we see it from his point of view, or we see it from the boy's point of view. It's not an objective camera. We see what he sees, and we
Hmm.
think, and so we can understand what he thinks. And it, I wouldn't say it's done in a gratuitous way, or everything I think is suitable for the story. So that's good. I don't think there's anything that's needless in there, but uh it's I'm meant to feel uncomfortable watching this. I'm pretty sure as
A
a
little bit.
46-year-old man, maybe because I've got a daughter as well, but I'm to see the sexualization of a 16-year-old girl, and also the camera having a zoomed in focus on very specific parts of her body. Like, I think that's the point, but I don't know how to make that point without sexualizing the 16-year-old.
I mean,
Does that make
I
sense?
think the key point here for me is that I don't I don't think that the camera is like leering at her, which is where I think it would like cross the line.
Hmm.
I think that because we're very clearly in Bastien's point of view for the whole movie, and because he's having this like awakening, he's going through the thing, and I think because
Hmm.
I think the camera shows that he is basically in awe of her, which I think is a very true
Hmm.
thing. It probably is or was for most people.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't, I don't think it over sexualizes her personally. I don't think it doesn't sexualize her. Don't get me wrong. But I think a key phrase here would be what you said is that it all works and is in service of the story.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I think where it would become over sexualization would be if the camera was like actively leering at her, the way that
Mm.
Bay's camera actively leers at the women in his films.
Oh,
Do you know what
yeah,
I
no,
mean?
yeah, no, totally.
And
And
I
it's
think,
difficult.
and I think that if the camera, if the camera lingered more, I think it would be a problem. I think, but it
Mm.
doesn't. It never. I don't think the camera like. It's hard to describe this, but I don't think the camera overstays its welcome in any of these scenes. If that makes sense for what I'm trying to
It
get
does.
across here.
Yeah, I just
So,
think it.
so
Yeah.
again, I don't think it doesn't sexualize her. I just don't think that it is like gratuitous or overt. I think that it is in service of the story,
Yeah.
and it works in that context. But I would be very curious to hear. I'd actually be interested to hear what Charlotte LeBon, the director, would have to say about that, and also just like I should probably go find. I try not to read reviews before we talk because I
Mhm.
want to make sure I have my own words in my mouth. But I'm going to go and read some reviews from some female critics to see if they
Mm.
have anything to say about it, because I think that might be, it's certainly an interesting talking point at at what point does that work and what and or not.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it's fine, and I think that again the moment, I think another word you use that makes it make sense to me, that makes it for me, is that the moments you're talking about all do feel incredibly uh, intimate versus sexual, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. I know those are very interrelated words, but I, for me, those scenes are trying to capture the intimacy between them and not like any kind of gratuitous sex or again like leering or um yeah. Anyway, that's all
Yeah.
I'm trying to say.
It's interesting because I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I think you've hit the nail right on the head. And there's one scene. I mean, it's worth mentioning that the lake itself, it's called Falcon Lake. The lake is an important character in this movie, and it's a important location for this movie in a number of ways. And there's a they go swimming a lot, and there's a scene Probably in the first third when Bastian and Chloe have gone swimming in the lake, and we see his look over, and we cut to a very tight focus of her breasts in a tank top, swim top in the water, and so it's finding that balance between showing us what he's feeling and thinking, and being gratuitous for like the pervy audience who want to see a 16-year-old in a swimsuit. And I do think that it does strike that balance really well. Like, I think
Hmm.
it's a very powerful movie, and it feels very, very real, particularly as I have been Bastian with in that situation, particularly in the parties. Like, we've all been there, as you said, and
Hmm.
um, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm meant to feel comfortable with it, and so I think that's okay. But I would be interested in other perspectives.
I
Honestly,
think
though,
I was gonna say I think a scene that like the one you're talking about, like I think in
uh,
isolation would be maybe a little bit damning, but there are other scenes, and I think the one that might sort of hammer this home for me is there's a scene early on in the film where they've been hanging out a little bit and they're both about to go to a party and they're both changing, and when she needs to go and change when she needs to change her top, and she changes her top and her bra, and in a movie that was over the line, she would be facing away, but we would still see her. And in this
mm,
movie, he moves in front. He doesn't just turn around; he moves in front of
yeah,
the camera,
yeah.
right? And that is it's important on two things. One, because it doesn't over sexualize her, and also it's still within his perspective. Like we're seeing what he is seeing, right?
I
So,
wonder actually. I wonder if this is a Birds of Prey hair bubble moment. Yeah, because I wonder if this film had been directed by a male director of any quality, if we would have had that scene you pick actually is a great example. I think that speaks to a female understanding how to tell the story of a female, that in a way that I don't think a male director would have perhaps let us see her bareback, or see more behind Bastion. And
mhm.
I think that's a really good point.
I think if it had been a lesser film, or again perhaps any male director, I think there's a very good chance that he would have been screen right and she would have been screen left with her back toward us.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally, totally. And one thing I want to say about this film as well, that I've been quite vocal watching low budget Canadian films when they're not directed well and when they're not shot well. And my thing with low budget movies is the director has very little control over really anything apart from the script and the delivery. And it was this is another Canadian movie that has just blown me away. Especially this is a first time feature, which I cannot believe because the framing is incredible, but also the acting, the line delivery, the treatment of the characters is so professional and so well done. It's given me, this is the kind of film coming out of Canada that makes me want other countries, especially America, to start recognizing Canada much more in its like local award shows, especially like I said the same thing about Brother,
Mhm.
and this is another great example of a really well made film at its core, even beyond the acting and the script, just made really well. The editing's great as well. So I if this is her first film, I can't wait to see what the director does next.
It's your first feature at any rate.
Yes.
Um, although she is an actress as well, she's been around for a while. Her name is Charlotte Lebon, and I think the thing we would have seen her in most recently was as an actor. Was she had a small role in the movie Fresh last year.
Oh, is that
Uh,
her? Right, the friend.
she no, she was the I think she's like the hang on. Her character's name was Anne. I think she's like the wife of
Oh,
Sebastian
right.
Stan.
Oh, I do recognize her. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't like she's been around a while. It's certainly she's been in the industry for a while.
Hmm.
Um,
That's
but
great.
yeah, I think this year's Canadian Screen Awards, although I know you will disagree on at least one of the Best Picture nominees,
Is it Viking?
is Viking. Viking was nominated for a ton of awards, and I
I
know,
did not like that
but
film.
yeah, and you were like the only one I know who actually actively like didn't like
Yeah.
it. So it's
No.
it's interesting, but it didn't win anything. So
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, it's interesting. It's actually interesting, more interesting to me that it basically didn't win anything at all, as far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Brother, which we previously mentioned, did win Best Picture, which is well deserved. I thought so.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Viking won Best Cinematography. That's what it won. I know it won one thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
uh,
So what will
there's,
you give? What will you give
I
Falcon
don't
Lake
know. There's one
out
part
of?
of this movie. It's interesting. Both movies we're talking about today I loved, but one part in each movie really wound me up, like really annoyed me. And was it realistic? And it's hard to talk about either one without it being a spoiler. Um, but what would I give Falcon Lake? It's a 4-star movie for me. 4 out of 5. How about you?
Yeah, it's a 4-star movie for me as well.
Great.
It's too kind of wonderful not to be. Even if it is a bit
Mhm.
dark and a bit melancholy at times, it's so truthful to, I think, just the very general teenage experience.
Yeah,
um, that
yeah, for real.
it's wonderful, and I'm very glad Charlotte Le Bon won the John Dunning Award, because I think it's
Mhm.
very very well deserved.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay, good. Let's move on to our second movie. What is it?
indeed. So we're moving on to another more indie release. This one is American, and it is the Neon release, or in Canada, Elevation Pictures release. How to Blow Up a Pipeline. And spoiler alert: this is a movie that talks about how to blow up a pipeline. And spoiler alert: it's great. I really enjoyed this movie.
Give us a summary.
The summary is that a bunch of disparate people, all sort of with links, but not all to one another. But basically, the entire story of this movie starts with them meeting up, and then planning and executing the bombing of a pipeline. And all of the characters, some of the characters know each other. Like there's two of them are best friends, um, but one of them is like a local landowner in Texas where the film is set. Um, one of them is just the partner of another person. Um, one is a kid who's been experimenting with bomb making on YouTube. And one other pair is a pair of like young activists from a different part of the country. They're all from different parts of the country, and they're all brought together by basically um, the oil industry somehow destroying their lives, or at least the world. Um, so, like, the landowner has had his land seized, and the two best friends, one of them has developed a rare and terminal form of leukemia, and so on and so forth. And the character who is from, I think he's from North Dakota, if memory serves, um, called Michael. He's First Nations, he's Indigenous, and his whole, like, the land his people are from is basically been seized by and exploited by oil companies. Um, and so they all connect through various means, and then they go blow up a pipeline. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say they blow up a pipeline because it's in the title. Um, but but the way they get there is kind of wonderful. The film go proceeds with a I use this word a lot, I've noticed, but a relentless momentum and an ongoing ramp up of tension with just the right amount of like flashbacks that calm you down. As we watch their plan execute in near real time, and at opportune moments we get flashbacks to illuminate their motivations for doing this. And um, I I loved this movie. I thought it was great. I
Mhm.
thought I like it is, to be clear, it is not a subtle movie. the themes are right there on the film's sleeve and explicitly stated several times throughout the film. And um, but it is it feels like such a wonderful reaction to where we are in the world right now. Such a and like honestly, like if people started blowing up pipelines, would that be the worst thing? Would it be the worst thing? I don't know. I don't know. It's hard not to have sympathy with. I mean, we must all know someone whose life has been fucked over by the oil companies, right? Um, I doubt we're more than 1 or 2 degrees separated from someone whose life has been utterly destroyed. And I think this film, this type of story, as a reaction to that, is feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. I don't know how did you feel about it.
Yeah, I just completely echo all of that. I'm actually staggered that this film got made, astounded that it got made, even past the script stage. I don't know how this film is out in the open because it is the most incredible call to arms for this generation. It's like if you, it's like the stuff from Fight Club that isn't the rest of Fight Club. It's the anti-capitalist uh, destruction of Earth destroying things to make a point, but that's the whole point of the movie. And it makes you so angry and energized at the same time to watch this film. I couldn't, as I was watching it, I couldn't believe it existed because the fossil fuel industry has such influential fingers everywhere. Like there's money everywhere. They've got lawyers everywhere. Like there's
Hmm.
been multiple movies. Like Aaron Brockovich is a great example. I know that it's not fossil fuel industry, but they got money to lawyer up against stuff like this. I am just amazed that it didn't get sued into obscurity, like for showing how to make a bomb or promoting blowing up pipelines. Or I'm just amazed, and it is probably one of the most important films out at the moment. And
Yeah.
that's before you get into how well it's constructed as well. Like it's a great ensemble cast, and it uses some light mystery box elements. So there's each of the characters has its their own flashback or set of flashbacks, and in those flashbacks you learn vital information, often in the last third of the movie, that reframes the entirety of the movie.
Hmm.
And sometimes I don't react to that well at all. Um, I have gone off that pretty aggressively, gone off it as a storytelling technique, um, where you only learn parts of the story as it unfolds. I'm sorry to bring. I know you love Yellow Jackets, but I can't. I'm finding it really hard to deal with the two timelines revealing information about each other. But
Someone didn't watch Lost.
oh no, I loved Lost. That's the thing. I loved Lost. I loved the Lost ending. But I don't know why. Maybe I'm just getting more impatient. However, this film does it really, really well. Like the flashbacks are, um, maybe it's the timing of them that the information they reveal is all revealed at really logical parts of the film, and does that really nice thing of giving you information for the future, but also reframing things in the past that you were questioning. And it's really well directed, shot, and edited, and the music in this, or the soundtrack, I should say, it's like my heart was just racing by the end of this film. It's an hour and 40 minutes, and you're right, it's like a high speed chase. It starts and it doesn't stop. That
Yeah.
it just ramps and ramps and ramps, and by the end of it, if this doesn't like energize people in this generation to go out and stop what's happening, then I would be amazed. And I'm amazed that it's allowed to exist because it actively does that. Like, it's incredible film. I don't know why it exists, but I'm glad it does.
Yeah, I think part of what you're talking about is that it's an hour and 40 minutes or so. I think it's actually like 140, like an 104 minutes, and it's it makes a great case for narrative economy, by which I
Hmm.
mean it jumps into the story, it tells you all the things you need to know and none of the things you don't, and then when you do need to know something, it then tells you
Hmm.
at pretty much the perfect moment every time. and um, I think, and the one like, and it makes you know the things you need to know, like why is Dwayne the redneck there? Oh, his land was seized. You know
Mhm.
why is Theo there? Like, why are Theo and Sochi there at all? Like, oh, they grew up together, and then Theo has leukemia. Like,
Mhm.
and it's a direct result of the pollution in the place where they grew up together. Um, and every one of those reveals comes at, I would say, like I said, pretty much just like the perfect moment for it to do so. And there's a there is, I guess, a couple of twists and turns in the last
Mhm. Yeah, for
act.
sure.
um, and it's also kind of refreshing to realize that, like, honestly, the the bad guys in this story are the fossil fuel companies, and also the bad guys are all of the structures that keep them in place, up to and including law enforcement.
Mhm.
You know, as evidenced by, there's two major law enforcement, well, I guess they're minor law enforcement characters, and each of them are there to prop up the status quo in different infuriating ways. And in one of them, in a different movie, would be the hero.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting to see that character as the villain.
Mhm.
And I think, honestly, more truthful. I think.
Mhm.
I don't know.
It's
They,
high.
I get the movie existing. I just hope it makes a bigger. I hope it makes a bigger splash than I worry that it's going to. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like Neon's a great distribution company, a great production company. I just feel like they don't necessarily have the cachet or the money to get this in front of as many eyeballs as they
Mm.
probably should. Even though, apparently, I saw on TikTok the other day, apparently at least one jurisdiction in the states like issued some kind of warning about the movie based on its title, because
Yeah.
it might be instructional. And, like, it's not instructional, but
No.
it's not it doesn't tell you how to make a bomb exactly. It doesn't not tell you that, though.
I mean, it kind of
Like,
gives you some pointers.
yeah, it gives you the broad strokes, but none of the details. But yeah, I think it can and should be an important film. Really hope that it makes a splash. I really hope that people latch onto it. I hope that it's, because it also just feels, I feel like the movie feels like most of us probably feel. Like, what are we doing to
Yeah.
solve these problems? I can't imagine what it must be like to be the age of these characters, like Ariel
Mm.
Rivera as Sochi and Sacha Lane as Theo, in their early 20s, who must look at people like us who are, we're in our 40s, and we were told when we were their age and younger that we were going to have to fix this, and then we
Mm.
proceeded to not do that, and we are still not doing it. And part of that is our complacency, and part of it is that we were told that it was our problem to fix, when 70% of all pollution comes from the top 100 corporations in the world. Like, it's the responsibility was shifted in a way that um, was not realistic. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to exist as a 20 something in the world we are leaving for them actively. You know what I mean?
And that I found that really interesting in this film. That one of the main themes that's very stark and told very clearly is this is not time for nuance or discussion. Like that time
Yeah.
has passed. There's one of the characters is in a group talking about how to gently disrupt things, and what someone in that group who we don't meet again is like, no, we've got to think about the economic effect and work through the different layers. And she's like, fuck that. Like, we are done with that. There's people dying now. We've got to stop
Yeah.
this now. And this whole film is like, fuck that. We've got to do something now. And
Yeah.
I don't know if it, I was, for some reason, I thought this film was a Canadian documentary before I started watching it. A Canadian documentary about the pipeline being built on First Nation land that was in the news like end of last year, like up on the north of BC, right? For that big one. And I don't know. And obviously, when I started watching, I realized I texted you within 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, this is an American movie, and it's not a documentary. But the way it's shot, I'm finding it really hard to describe how I feel about the way it's shot and acted. It's almost got some documentary elements to the way the camera moves and points at different people.
Hmm.
Even though it's a narrative story, it's not a documentary. It feels so tight, just like everything is so tight, and it is edited in such a way that is so the momentum from each scene just builds and builds and builds. It's and the color scale is really interesting as well. How it separates from what's happening now and what's happening in the flashbacks, which I thought was a really clever technical aspect as well. It's just beautifully put together, and it doesn't feel like a performed story, and that's testament to the ensemble cast as well. It just feels like something very very real and very scary and very revolutionary.
Yeah, I think that might count. So the book on which it's based is a nonfiction book written by a guy called Andreas Malm,
Hmm.
and I haven't read it, but I know that like effectively it's divided into three sections, and the first section is the thesis statement of the first section is basically at what point do we escalate, and
Hmm.
the second part is basically states that the ruling classes are not going to do anything about this.
Hmm.
Um, so and I feel like it's a really great, even though it's a fictional narrative adaptation of this semi memoir nonfiction book. I feel like it does a really good job of adapting what I feel the tone of this book must be. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, totally.
And also just adapting again the frustration of existing in a world that we've had ample time to fix and now
Hmm.
don't.
Hmm.
You know, it's so good. It's such a good movie. And
Yes.
everyone in it is good too. The whole cast is great,
Yeah.
with I would argue one exception. Um, there's one performance in this movie that I was a little bit like, okay, like just dial it in, like just like you're a little over, you're a little much, right?
Yeah. Who's that?
It doesn't matter. I don't want to like
Okay.
discourage anyone from seeing it. I'll tell you after. But
Okay.
there's
Sure.
there's one character who I'm like, everyone's acting really like fun and naturalistically, and just like it doesn't ever. It feels like you're sitting at a campfire with them, except for this one guy who's like acting, capital A acting, a couple of times in the movie, and
Oh, I think I know what you mean. Right. Yeah.
and uh, and maybe there's a twist that involves that character, a couple of twists and turns that involve that character, and I feel like maybe it was a choice to try and
Yeah.
like throw some red herrings in there, but
Yeah.
it's kind of
I
too
think it's that.
overt. It's kind of too overt to be successful. But
So
that
I
but this
I
is
totally
but this
yeah.
is a very minor nitpick. Like this is a very small thing I'm talking about. I'm actively looking for something to be like, well, it's not perfect, but like this is a great film, and maybe I should just shut up about
No, I
it.
know exactly what I think. I know exactly who you mean because I thought the same thing. But then when that gets reframed later, I thought, oh, okay, that's okay. It's
Yeah,
hard to not spoil this, but
yeah.
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean,
But yeah, it is.
it's
It
it's
is
sort of
exceptional.
interesting. It's sort of interesting because again, I don't think it's a spoiler to talk about the end of this movie because the end of the movie is the result
Well,
of the title.
well, there is an element of will they, won't they? Because some things don't go to plan. There's one
Oh, but it's never will they or
wrinkle,
won't they. It's never will they or won't they do it. It's will they or won't they succeed. Like they are committed from the get go.
right? So will they or won't they succeed in blowing up the pipeline?
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, will they or won't they
like it's not
be
will they.
successful
It's not like
in
they
doing the
never
thing?
they never have a long night of the soul where they're like, are we doing the right
Oh, is that
thing?
what you mean? All right,
Right?
I understand. Yeah, yeah, no, no, no.
Like
Yeah,
they
I
they
meant be successful.
yeah. So it's
Um,
yeah, I don't know. You're gonna say
there's
something. Go ahead.
one, yeah, there's one part of this film that annoyed me that led to it's a very important part of a wrinkle in their plan when they're actually going on site with the bombs. Something happens that leads to someone else to go to that location. Know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
the fact they didn't deal with that in the moment when they've dealt with everything else in the moment, I was like, no, I don't believe they wouldn't have dealt with that. But
Yeah,
it's a
I believe I
very,
know what you're talking about.
yeah,
Without
it's a,
without
and
getting
then
into spoilers.
that then caused something else that had to be a change of the plan to deal with that. And I was like, I don't believe, after how meticulous they are with everything else, I don't believe that would have just been just left, right?
Hmm.
But it is a minor, it's a minor nitpick.
Yeah.
Who's to say in the moment, like, they're all very stressed at trying not to blow themselves up in the process. So we've all been in, it could have just been a stupid oversight as they're trying to do from one thing and go to another.
Well, and at that point of the movie, there's sort of 2 points to fit that description. But at that point in the movie, um, if it's the one I think it is, they're also like on a timeline, and
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like you're right. It does feel a bit like they really wouldn't do anything about that, but also
Mm-hmm.
it also feels like, you know what, we just don't have time to deal with this at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
they're literally synchronizing their watches and counting the minutes at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
It's true.
yeah,
Yeah, all good points.
I get it though. But yeah. So I mean, and yeah, I just want to highlight the cast again. Like, I don't think I've seen Ariella Bauer in anything, but she's great as Sochi.
Mm-hmm.
Forrest Goodluck, who we have seen in a number of things, is legitimately great as Michael, the bomb maker. And Sasha Lane is, I think, a really interesting performer, and I really appreciate her um, uh, in this movie. I feel like she has a really interesting and natural screen presence that is hard to capture,
Mm-hmm.
um, hard to duplicate.
For me, it was Jamie Lawson stood out for me. It's a great cast, but I've never. Oh, well, apparently, I have seen her in other stuff, but she plays this really interesting middle ground for a little part of the movie, and I thought she was just fascinating to watch as a performer. I thought she was
Mhm.
great.
Yeah, and I think Christine Froseth as well, who has sort of she's
Mm-hmm.
one of the younger activists that's sort of disconnected from the group, but and she has to deal with a number of like her story has a number of red herrings in it, which I think are very well handled, and I think she does a really good job of keeping us on the edge of like what is going on with her character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yep.
so I'm going to give this movie a full 5 stars. I don't know about you.
Damn right. Five out, absolutely. This is a 5-star movie, and it's a movie that everyone in that generation should go and watch.
Yeah.
Everyone should watch this film because the 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 level of corruption
Mhm.
in America, like with the news this morning as well, the gun industry, the fossil fuel industry, the politics, the where the money is, it's just unbelievable how they're just saying the quiet stuff out loud now because they don't think they can be touched anymore. And this movie is an absolute fierce reminder that we can do something, even if it's not the legal thing to do, maybe isn't always the right thing to do, and vice versa. So I don't know. uh, I'm not about to go out and blow up a pipeline, but holy shit, I felt energized after watching this.
Yeah, I think
Look,
even
look.
the sort of thesis of the movie, which at one point is explicitly stated that this is an act of self defense, I think
Mhm,
is
mhm.
pretty well sums up the movie.
Yeah, 5 out of 5 for sure.
Yeah.
Good.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, all right. Well, that's where we're going to wrap it up for today. Not sure what we're covering next week, but we will be back with something. In the meantime, thank you everyone for listening. One more time, you can find us on the socials. We are on most of them at Awesome Friday CA. You can find me at Matthew AF, and you can find Simon at Temporary Pen on the Twitters. Me on Twitter and Instagram. And if you like what you've heard, please consider giving us a rating on your podcasting platform of choice. 5 stars would be great. Or just subscribe. That helps immeasurably. But we do have a Patreon, which you can find in the show notes. And if you are a subscriber, we do give out an extra 10 to 20 minutes of bonus chat every week for our subscribers because we love you.
We
Um,
do.
we do. We record this here in Vancouver on the traditional ancestral lands of the Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations. And one more time, thank you so much for listening and joining us on this awesome Friday.
Bye-bye.